Welcome to Ladies of Another View on Beck. And as we love to say when our friend Trent Loos is here, ladies and a dude.
I'm certainly not a lady.
We would never accuse you of that. So we have Jan and Amy today, and of course our guest is Trent Loos. Now Trent has a show right here on Beck TV, Trent on the Loose, and welcome to the show today, Trent.
You know, y'all made that happen. Well, I don't think Amy was here that day, but you know, Ladies and Another View and a Dude morphed into Trent on the Loose. So thank you.
Amen.
My first official thank you to you,
It's
Jan.
good stuff.
It is. It's been great. It's been great for Beck. It's so nice to have that freedom of you just talking about anything you want, any topics. Nothing is held back. There's no script. It's real people doing real news.
Well, tomorrow will be Marty Beard, and there was a script because you can't let Marty Beard just say what he wants.
Amen. I love him to death. He's a squirrel.
Yeah, I want to say, Amy, your husband is really good friends with him.
They've been friends since high school, so he was one of the first people I met when we came to North Dakota, and sitting on a couch, and I'm like, what am I sitting on? And I'm like, oh, it's your family horse that you've pelted out and draped over your couch. And I don't think my belly has ever hurt so much from laughing from his stories of them coon hunting and gas station and horsehair wigs, and yeah.
Was that when he still had the pet porcupine?
Oh yeah, or the pet coyote, or I remember the pet coyote, and yeah, he's a character.
Not that he's keeping any wild animals illegally or anything.
No.
They
No,
just don't
absolutely
leave.
not.
No,
Yes.
no.
They're
No.
free to leave at any point. Yep, that's
Amen.
why I send my son to him in the summertime.
Right. So, Trent, you are up here because there's a pretty big hot topic going on right now. It's called a 30 by 30 land grab. Now, we've kind of touched base on this in the past, but tell us what it is.
Well, this week is quite significant for 30 by 30 because it was 1 year ago this week, January the 27th, that Biden signed Executive Order 14008, and we are talking now about Section 6. I just want to remind everybody that you need to read this 57-page executive order, which usually we think about executive order, 3-4 paragraphs maybe. This is a 57-page executive order, which is mostly geared at eliminating fossil fuels.
Wow.
And that gets left out of the equation, but I sat down and it took me an hour and a half. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a quick reader, Jan, but anyway, I wanted to read it very thoroughly. I wanted to understand it, and it is a blatant statement that we are going to eliminate fossil fuels. Now, Section 6 has 2 paragraphs, which we refer to as 30 by 30. And the short version is that the federal government plans to have an additional 30% of the United States landmass in a conservation easement by 2030. What's not included in this executive order is this is part of the United Nations plan in the big picture to be at 50 by 50. And not just in the United States, this is around the world. It's a blatant attempt at removing ownership of land from people and turning us into peasants like the Bolshevik Revolution was all about right after World War I. It's right out of the United Nations, the same playbook. And so we're going to have some meetings and not just talk about these problems, but empower people on solutions. And what do we do to stand up? I just want to add quickly that while we talk about 30 by 30, this is just one of the tools that the federal and state government use to remove our property rights and using our land as we see fit. Endangered Species Act has long been the #1 arm of the federal government to tell us that we can't do this with this property or that with this property. And I always bring it back to just a simple thing that if you have a house and you want to put a deck on your house, you got to get a permit to put a deck on your property. Why do you have to get a permit to put a deck on your house? Because somebody wants to give you permission to do with your property what you see fit.
Or tax it.
Well, then that's the next thing. Then they tax it. So we're going to talk about 30 by 30 in Dickinson tomorrow night and New Salem on Wednesday night, and just empower people to take a stand and do something.
Sure.
Oh, look at that graphic.
Yeah, we do have a graphic for Dickinson, and so that is 5:30 Mountain Time. Now, don't forget that. That's Mountain Time. 6 o'clock Mountain Time is when Trent starts. So there's a social at 5:30, or excuse me, a dinner at 5:30. Up here we call it supper. You know, Jesus didn't sit down to the last dinner. He sat down to the last supper. Let's be clear. And then the next day you will be in New Salem. We don't have that graphic, but where's it at in New Salem?
The community center
In New Salem.
at 5:30 Central Time. And I don't think this is a supper or a dinner. It's chili.
Chili. Well,
That is a
that's
meal.
breakfast.
Yeah, that's anytime you want. You know,
That's a 2 a.m. thing.
Trent, I have a question here. I'm reading off of your letter of opposition, and I found it interesting because you said 30% in addition to what they already have. Because I
Correct.
think that when we see 30 by 30, 30%, what's the big deal? However, if I'm looking on your letter of opposition here, 29% of the total acres of land in the United States.
28.4 to be exact.
Okay, 28.4 is already owned by the federal government,
Correct.
plus an additional 4.5% by the individual state governments. So that's 33.5-ish percent. You add another 30% on that, you're talking about the United States government owning over 50% of land and waterways. And
Okay, so to be clear, you're spot on with your 33%. 1 in 3 acres is owned by the federal or state government. There's an additional 12% currently in conservation easements
okay,
that's not included in your formula.
okay,
And then they want a 30% addition to that 12% and 33%. So if you do the math, cowboy arithmetic says this is 75%. To be clear, the 12% and the 30% is not to be owned by the federal government, but to be in a conservation easement owned by me, and then I got to call the boss and see what I can
same
do with
thing.
my own property.
Right.
Right. Because every one of those conservation easements is in perpetuity. I don't even know how long that is.
right.
Well, so there's things like Sierra Club and the Nature Conservancy and all of that kind of thing. How do those groups play into this?
So they're the entity that come along with the public-private partnership and actually pull off the conservation easements. Nature's Conservancy controls more land than any other group other than the government in the United States. And so what they do is they write the easement, they put in the parameters in place on what you can or can't do with this property, and then they typically sell that or partner with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the Forest Service or some government entity so that it's a public-private partnership between two entities. That way the federal government still has control over what's going on with your land, but it's that middle NGO that sets it all up and makes it happen.
Sounds like a whole lot of control, period.
Well, if it was Bernie Madoff, they would call it a pyramid scheme and put you in prison. But if it's the federal government, we can do it without any problems.
Well, and even not only that, not only the federal government, but Bill Gates is busy buying up land. You know, and it's like, so he is also in on this, the one world order, you know, agenda, it used to be Agenda 21 and now they've moved it off to 25. But, you know, so there's even people coming forward, big billionaires that are in cahoots with the government that are taking over land. Do you talk about that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Bill Gates is actually the 51st largest landowner in the United States. That's interesting because the media wants everybody to believe that he has become the #1 farmland owner. Key word, farmland. 100% of what Bill Gates owns can be tilled and will be farmed. Ted Turner, John McGlone, both are 1 and 2. They own more land than Bill Gates, but they have pasture land, they have forest land, and so I find it really fascinating that the media tries to pit this person or that person, and they leave John McGlone and Ted Turner completely out of the mix today. But you said something, Mary, I want to follow up on, because when I started doing radio 20 years ago, 22 years ago to be exact, and if you had somebody that you wanted to have as a guest to talk about Agenda 21, oh, you conspiracy whack job, you can't talk about that. That's just nuts. Well, let me ask you, now that 2020 is in the rearview mirror, how did it treat you?
Right?
So maybe Agenda 21 wasn't such a conspiracy theory after all. Look what we lived through. The next year that everybody's talking about is 2030, 30 by 30. You see so many initiatives so I can't wait to see what's in store for us in 2030, because every one of these benchmarks all have some global elite money at the United Nations level that are going to come in and tell us how we're going to live our lives.